The first person to stand is the man nearest the windows. One moment, he is seated at the end of a table long enough to belong in a palace, turning a silver pen between his fingers while the rain slides down 40 floors of glass. The next, his chair moves back and he rises. Then the woman beside him stands. Then the lawyers. Then the finance team. 12 executives in dark suits come to their feet in a wave so smooth and immediate that I stop just inside the boardroom door, certain someone important has entered behind me. I move aside. No one looks past me. Every eye in the room is fixed on the woman standing at the head of the table. She is wearing a black suit I have never seen before. Her dark hair is pinned at the nape of her neck, instead of falling loose over one shoulder the way it did when she kissed me goodbye in our kitchen 3 hours ago. The thin gold watch on her wrist is the one she told me was a retirement gift from her department. Her wedding ring is gone, but I can see the pale line it left around her finger. I know that line because I put the ring there. I know the small scar near her thumb because I held a bag of frozen peas against it the night she tried to repair our toaster without unplugging it. I know the slight tilt of her head when she is bracing for bad news. I know the exact shade her eyes turn when she has slept badly and is pretending she has not. I know this woman. At least, I believed I did. The silver-haired man by the windows buttons his jacket and says, "Good morning, Madam CEO." My wife does not correct him. She looks directly at me, and for less than a second, the woman I married appears inside the face of a stranger. Fear breaks through. Not fear of the executives, fear of me. Then the expression disappears. "Ms. Bennett," she says, her voice calm enough to make my hands colder. "Thank you for joining us. Please take the interpreter's seat." Ms. Bennett. At breakfast, she called me love. The man by the windows watches the space between us with quiet satisfaction. He places one hand on a stack of contracts and pushes them toward the empty chair beside my wife. "We are ready to approve the Bellwether acquisition, Madam CEO," he says. "Your office has already signed every word." No one in the room reacts. Why would they? To them, she is simply their CEO. They do not know that my legal name is Nora Bennett Cross. They do not know the woman at the head of their table burned our eggs this morning, kissed the flour off my cheek, and told me she would be organizing expense reports all day. They do not know that Evelyn Cross is married. Until 30 seconds ago, I did not know Evelyn Cross was the CEO. If you think love can survive a secret large enough to fill an entire skyscraper, stay with me. Because the title beside my wife's name was not the most dangerous thing waiting in that boardroom. It was one sentence buried on page 87, and before the day ended, that sentence would force Evelyn to choose between the company she had built and the marriage she had hidden. I walk to the empty chair, because my body understands professionalism even while my mind is coming apart. My assignment folder feels too heavy beneath my arm. The brass plate on the table reads, "Independent Language Council." I set my notes down, place my headset beside them, and take the seat without looking at Evelyn again. Across from me, 3 representatives from Laurent Urban Holdings wait beneath the blue light of a video screen. They are in Paris, where the afternoon sun glows against the conference room behind them. I recognize Amélie Laurent, the company's general counsel, from our preparation call. She gives me a polite nod. I return it automatically. The silver-haired man sits only after Evelyn does. "For the record," he says, "Victor Hale, Chairman of the Board. We are reconvening to finalize the bilingual acquisition agreement and authorize closing." Victor Hale. I know the name. Everyone in corporate law knows it. He is the man newspapers describe as disciplined when they mean ruthless, the architect behind a dozen mergers that made investors rich and left entire neighborhoods trying to remember what used to stand there. Bellwether is my neighborhood. It is the old brick district, where my mother opened a language center, with 6 folding chairs and a borrowed whiteboard. It is where refugees learned enough English to speak to their children's teachers, where teenagers translated college applications for their parents, where I taught evening French classes before interpreting became my full-time work. Cross Meridian Group had announced a partnership to redevelop the waterfront 6 months ago. Evelyn, my Evelyn, who I believed worked as an assistant somewhere inside this company, had sat beside me on our sofa while I read the announcement and promised the community protections looked strong. Now she is sitting at the head of the company purchasing it. Victor begins speaking about timelines, regulatory clearance, and shareholder expectations. Amélie answers in French. I interpret each sentence into English and then reverse the flow when the cross-meridian lawyers respond. My voice remains measured. My terminology is exact. Years of training build a wall between what I feel and what the room receives. Evelyn does not look at me unless I am speaking. When she does, she looks with the controlled attention of a chief executive listening to a professional she has never met. That hurts more than the title. It would be easier if she appeared cruel. Instead, I notice the small things. Her right hand stays beneath the table, hidden from the board. The muscles near her jaw tighten whenever Victor interrupts me. When I pause to check the French source text, her gaze drops to the wedding ring line on my finger and returns to the contract so quickly no one else could catch it. She is afraid. I just do not know whether she is afraid of losing me or of being exposed. The presentation moves to the community easement section. A cross-meridian lawyer reads the English clause aloud, while I follow the certified French document on my screen. The purchaser will maintain access to all designated public service properties for a minimum term of 25 years, subject to revocation, at the purchaser's sole discretion following material redevelopment. My eyes stop on the French sentence. The words do not match. Not imperfectly, not in the harmless way two languages sometimes carry the same legal idea through different grammar. They say opposite things. The French agreement states that the community easement is irrevocable for 25 years. The English version says, cross-meridian can cancel it whenever redevelopment becomes inconvenient. That single change includes the Bellwether Language House, my mother's center. I lift my head. Victor is watching me. Is there a problem, Ms. Bennett? Evelyn asks. The room turns toward me. I could expose the discrepancy immediately. That is what my professional oath requires. But a red revision mark beside the French clause shows the change was made at 2:14 that morning, hours after my certified comparison file was locked. Someone altered one version after final review, and the authorization code beneath it belongs to the office of the CEO. My wife's office. There is a material inconsistency between the two language versions, I say. Victor's pen stops moving. Evelyn's face does not. Explain, she says. I read both clauses aloud. Amélie Laurent leans closer to her camera. The cross-meridian lawyers begin turning pages. Victor does nothing. He simply studies me, as if he has been waiting to discover whether I would notice. That is an outdated French draft, he says. The English language controls. The certification record identifies the French version as final, I answer. Both parties signed an equal authority provision. Neither language controls if the texts conflict. A clerical error, then. A clerical error changes punctuation. This change removes 25 years of legal protection. The room goes silent. Evelyn looks at the authorization code. Something cold enters her expression, and for the first time, I see the woman these executives stand for. She does not raise her voice. She does not need to. Closing is suspended, she says. Victor turns toward her. The market has already been notified. Then the market can be notified that Cross Meridian reads its contracts before acquiring $400 million in property. Your office approved the revision. My office will determine who used its authorization. Victor's gaze slides to me. And perhaps we should determine why an outside interpreter has taken such a personal interest in one neighborhood provision. There it is. He knows. Maybe not everything, but enough. Evelyn closes the contract. Ms. Bennet identified an error within the scope of her assignment. Her interest is irrelevant. Is it? Victor asks. The screen at the far end of the room changes. The contract disappears. In its place is a photograph taken beneath strings of warm garden lights 2 years earlier. I am wearing a simple ivory dress. Evelyn is laughing against my forehead. Our hands are joined between us, both wedding rings visible. My favorite photograph from the best day of my life is suddenly 10 feet tall in a room full of strangers. No one stands this time. Amelie removes her glasses. One executive whispers something I cannot hear. The general counsel beside Victor goes white. Victor folds his hands. Perhaps Ms. Bennet's interest is relevant after all. Evelyn looks at the photograph, then at me. The fear is gone from her face. What replaces it is worse. Recognition. She understands this was never a contract meeting. It was a trap, and I had walked into it because the woman who shared my bed had never trusted me with enough truth to recognize the door. The first time I met Evelyn, she was 11 minutes late to beginner French and carrying a notebook with a coffee stain shaped like a continent across the cover. That is the version of her my mind reaches for, while the boardroom turns our wedding into evidence. The Bellwether Language House occupied the second floor above a bakery, and every evening the stairwell smelled like sugar and warm bread. My mother had died the year before, and teaching her Tuesday class was the only part of the center I had refused to give up. I worked court assignments and business conferences during the day, then came back at night to write irregular verbs on the same whiteboard she had used for 15 years. Evelyn arrived in a gray wool coat wet from the rain. She apologized to the whole room, took the last chair, and spent 90 minutes trying to pronounce the French word for squirrel with such intense concentration that I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. After class, she stayed behind. I am usually better at things than this, she told me. That sounds like something people say when they are not better at this. She stared at me for one serious second, then laughed. It was not the polite laugh I would later hear her use at dinners. It surprised her on the way out. Warm, low, completely unguarded. I loved that laugh before I loved anything else about her. She told me she was an office assistant, preparing for meetings with a French partner. That was technically true. She worked in an office. She assisted an entire company in remaining alive. I simply did not understand the scale of the sentence. She returned every Tuesday. She sat in the same chair, took immaculate notes, and remained terrible at squirrel. 3 weeks later, she brought me coffee because she had noticed I always arrived carrying 2 bags and never had a free hand. 6 weeks later, she helped me stack chairs after class. 8 weeks later, we stood beneath the bakery awning while rain turned the street silver, and she asked whether teachers were allowed to have dinner with former students. "You are still enrolled," I told her. "Then I will withdraw immediately." I laughed. One dinner became Sunday mornings at the market, cheap noodles after my late assignments, and quiet nights in my apartment where Evelyn sat at the kitchen table answering emails she said came from demanding executives. She never acted wealthy. She compared grocery prices. She repaired buttons instead of replacing shirts. She carried the same scuffed leather tote until one handle began to separate, and when I offered to buy her another, she kissed my palm and said she liked things that proved they could last. I thought she meant the bag. When she proposed, she did it in the empty classroom at Bellwether. She had written one sentence on my mother's whiteboard in careful French. "I want to speak every language your heart understands." The grammar was wrong. I said yes anyway. Now Victor Hale has displayed our wedding photograph beneath the Cross Meridian logo, and every memory rearranges itself around the possibility that I was the only person in my marriage who believed ordinary was the truth instead of a costume. "This session is adjourned," Evelyn says. Victor does not move. The board has an obligation to investigate an undisclosed spousal conflict in a transaction involving property personally connected to that spouse. The interpreter was appointed by an independent agency, under a name no one connected to you, because it is her professional name. How convenient. Evelyn stands. Everyone else remains seated now, which tells me more about the danger than Victor's tone does. General Counsel will preserve every version of the agreement and every access log, she says. No document leaves this system. No employee discusses this meeting outside an authorized investigation. The board can examine my marriage, my disclosure decisions, and every action my office took. But this acquisition will not close while the language versions conflict. Victor smiles without warmth. There will be an emergency leadership vote tomorrow at 9. Tomorrow. Less than 24 hours for Evelyn to prove she did not alter the contract. Less than 24 hours for me to decide whether the woman who had protected my neighborhood in private was the same woman who had deceived me at home. Evelyn looks at me. Ms. Bennett, please remain. I close my folder. My assignment ended when you suspended the meeting, Madam CEO. It is the first time I have called her that. She flinches, as if I have struck her. Then I walk out. The boardroom door closes behind me, but the photograph remains burned against the back of my eyes. I reach the elevator before my hands begin to shake. Not dramatically, just enough that I press the call button twice because my finger misses it the first time. The polished metal doors reflect a woman in a navy dress, carrying an interpreter's folder against her chest like a shield. She looks composed. She looks employable. She looks nothing like someone who has just discovered that her wife owns the building. The doors open. Nora. Evelyn's real voice reaches me from the corridor. I turn. She has followed me out without her jacket. For the first time all morning, she looks like the woman from our kitchen. Her shoulders are no longer perfectly square. One strand of hair has come loose beside her face. Her ring is back on her finger. That detail almost breaks me. You cannot follow me out of your own emergency board meeting, I say. I can if you are leaving believing the wrong thing. Which wrong thing? That my wife is the CEO? That she let me defend Bellwether from a contract carrying her authorization? Or that everyone in that room learned I was married before I learned who I married? The elevator waits open beside me. Evelyn glances toward the boardroom. Please give me 10 minutes. You had 3 years. I step into the elevator. She does not try to stop the doors. As they close, I see her standing alone in the hallway, wedding ring visible, while the company she hid from me waits behind one door, and the wife she may have lost disappears behind another. My phone begins vibrating before I reach the lobby. Calls from the interpreting agency. 2 emails from Cross Meridian Legal. A news alert with Evelyn's face beside a headline about a delayed acquisition. No mention of the marriage yet, but Victor's photograph did not come from a locked drawer. Someone had searched for it, prepared it, and placed it into a board presentation before I entered the room. The trap had been built in advance. Outside, the rain has strengthened. I walk 6 blocks without opening my umbrella and end up beneath the green awning of Bellwether Language House. The bakery downstairs closed 2 years ago, but on wet days, the stairwell still seems to remember bread. The center is quiet. Morning classes have finished, and the afternoon volunteers have not arrived. I unlock the office that used to belong to my mother, set my folder on her desk, and stand in the middle of the room listening to the old radiator knock. This is where Evelyn first became real to me. Not Madam CEO, not Evelyn Cross of Cross Meridian Group, just the serious woman in the gray coat who wrote every vocabulary word twice and looked proud the first time she completed a sentence without asking for help. I want to be angry enough to erase that woman. I cannot. My phone rings again. The screen displays an international number. I nearly ignore it, then recognize the Paris code. Nora, Amélie Laurent says when I answer. Are you somewhere you can speak privately? Yes. I have been instructed by Cross-Meridian Council not to contact any participant from this morning. Then why are you calling? Because the clause you read was not in the agreement my client approved. And because 5 minutes after the meeting ended, someone attempted to replace the document in our shared closing room. I sit down. Attempted? Our system rejected it. We retain an immutable archive of every certified language file. The final French version was uploaded yesterday at 6:12 in the evening. The English mirror was identical when your agency certified it at 7:43. The English file changed at 2:14 this morning. The same time I saw in the revision record. Whose account made the change? The visible authorization belongs to Evelyn's office. The upload origin does not. I grip the phone. Where did it originate? Amelie is silent for 1 beat too long. A secure board terminal assigned to Victor Hale. There it is. Not proof of motive, but proof the lie has an address. Send it to Cross Meridian's general counsel. I have. She acknowledged receipt, then advised me that the board's internal review would determine authenticity. Victor chairs the board. Exactly. I look through the office window at the classroom beyond it. 20 mismatched chairs face my mother's whiteboard. A handwritten sign above the door says, "Every voice belongs here." Evelyn helped me repaint those letters last spring. She had stood on a ladder in old jeans, blue paint on her nose, while her company quietly negotiated the purchase of the entire block. Why would Victor change the easement? I ask. The protected properties occupy the most valuable portion of the waterfront, Amelie says. Without them, the development earns modest long-term returns. If the easement can be revoked, the land can be resold within 18 months for almost 3 times the acquisition price. Who benefits? That is the question Evelyn's board should be asking. I am afraid they are about to ask a different one. My phone chimes while she speaks. A headline appears across the screen. Secret CO marriage clouds $400 million deal. Below it is our wedding photograph. Victor did not wait for the board investigation. He handed our marriage to the press before I reached Bellwether. They are going to make me the story, I say. Yes, Amelie answers, which is why the document must become the story first. I thank her and end the call. For several seconds, I sit motionless beneath my mother's framed certificate, listening to rain strike the windows. Then the front door downstairs opens. Footsteps cross the hallway. Slow, familiar, unaccompanied. Evelyn appears in the office doorway. She has removed the black jacket. Her sleeves are folded to her elbows, and her wedding ring remains where it belongs. She looks at the old desk, the whiteboard, the chairs she once stacked after class. When her eyes reach me, she does not ask whether she may come in. She waits until I decide. Close the door, I say. She does. Did you know Victor altered the contract? No. Did you authorize anyone to remove the easement? No. Did you know our wedding photograph was in his presentation? No. Did you know your company was buying the building where we met? That answer takes longer. Yes. I nod because some pain arrives so cleanly, there is nothing to do but make room for it. When? 6 months ago, before the public announcement. You sat beside me while I read that announcement. I know. You let me explain the easement to you. I know. You told me it looked strong. It was strong when I approved it. That is not the point. I know that too. She does not defend herself. Somehow that makes it harder to stay angry, and I need the anger because beneath it is grief large enough to frighten me. Why? I ask. Not the company answer, not security or shareholders or whatever sentence your lawyers helped you build. Why did my wife look me in the eye every day and let me believe she scheduled someone else's meetings? Evelyn walks to the back row of chairs and sits in the same place she chose on her first night of French class. Because I came here planning to use the class for 6 weeks, she says. Laurent had opened preliminary merger discussions, and I was tired of understanding only half of what people said when the interpreters removed their emotion. I chose a community course because I did not want an executive tutor who would report my progress to the board. So even the way we met was about this deal. At first, her eyes do not leave mine. Then you laughed at my pronunciation. You told me my grammar was arrogant. You made everyone in the room feel intelligent, including the people who were afraid to speak. I came back because this was the only place in my week where no one wanted a decision from me. She looks around the classroom. When you asked what I did, I said I was an office assistant. It was cowardly, but it did not feel like a lie in that moment. I told myself I would correct it after dinner, then after our second date, then after the merger talks ended. Every time I waited, the truth became heavier. And then you proposed. By then, I was terrified. Of what? That I would leave because you were rich? That you would stay because I was. The sentence lands between us. She folds her hands, and I notice they are trembling. The woman I was engaged to before you knew exactly who I was, she says. She loved the access, the travel, the invitations. I did not understand that until Cross Meridian lost a government contract and our share price collapsed. Within a week, she had copied private board correspondence. Within a month, she sold it to a competitor. When I confronted her, she told me she had never agreed to love the version of me who could fail. I had known there was someone before me. I had never known the shape of the wound she left. That explains why you were afraid, I say. It does not explain why you took my choice away. No, Evelyn's voice is quiet. It does not. Did you think marrying me would make the lie smaller? I thought loving you well would give me the courage to tell you. Instead, loving you made me more afraid of the day you discovered how long I had waited. The old radiator knocks once in the silence. There were threats too, she continues. After the data breach, people photographed my home. Someone followed my sister's son from school. The board security committee advised me not to identify any partner publicly until the source was contained. I used that advice as permission to keep hiding, even after the danger passed. You protected me from risks I never agreed to take, then exposed me to one I never saw coming. Her eyes close briefly. Yes. No excuse. No elegant corporate defense. Just the truth, finally, stripped of everything that had kept it from me. If you were sitting where I was, tell me honestly, would the reason matter? Could you separate the woman who loved you faithfully from the woman who lied about her name every day? I wanted one answer. My heart and my dignity gave me two. Amélie called me, I say. Evelyn looks up. The altered file came from Victor's board terminal. The softness leaves her expression. Does she have the archive record? Yes, your general counsel has it too. Evelyn stands. Then Victor will claim the terminal was compromised. Would that work? Long enough to win tomorrow's vote. He does not need to prove I changed the document. He only needs to make the board uncertain whether my marriage influenced the transaction. If I lose authority before the forensic review begins, he controls the review. And the easement? He will restore it publicly, close the acquisition, then remove it later under a different amendment. You sound certain. Because I opposed his development plan 2 years ago. He wanted the Bellwether waterfront cleared completely. I forced the community protections into the proposal before Laurent would negotiate. I stare at her. You protected this center. I protected all 12 designated properties. Because of me? Because they deserved protection. She pauses. I knew what this one meant to you. That made me fight harder. There it is again. The impossible combination that has defined the entire day. A lie wrapped around an act of love. Protection used as both devotion and control. My phone rings. The interpreting agency director speaks before I finish saying hello. Nora, Cross Meridian has issued a conflict notice. You are suspended from the assignment pending review. Do not access the client portal, do not contact any transaction participant, and do not make any public statement. Understood. There is one more thing. A reporter is claiming you were placed on the assignment by the CEO. I was selected by your scheduling system. I know. We are preserving the record. But until legal clears this, I have to suspend all your upcoming corporate work. Not one assignment. All of it. The reputation I spent 8 years building has become collateral in a war I did not know existed. I end the call. Evelyn has heard enough to understand. I will correct this, she says. You cannot make another decision for me and call it protection. Then tell me what you want. I want you to go back to your board. I want you to fight for the clause because it is right, not because this building matters to your wife. And I want space to decide whether I still know how to be that wife. Pain crosses her face. She accepts it. The board's legal counsel will instruct us not to communicate before the vote, she says. If you need anything. I needed the truth 3 years ago. She nods once. Then she removes a key from her ring and places it on my mother's desk. It is not our apartment key. It is a small brass key I have never seen. What is that? A deposit box at First Harbor Bank. It contains copies of my original bellwether notes, the easement drafts I rejected, and every disclosure I made to Victor about my connection to the center. Your connection to the center? He knew I took classes here. He knew I donated anonymously after your mother died. He knew enough to build today's trap. Why give this to me? I am not giving you evidence to use for me. I am giving you information that concerns your name, your work, and this building. What you do with it is your choice. For the first time since the boardroom door opened, she gives me something without deciding how I should receive it. She walks to the classroom door, then stops. I love you, she says. That is the one part of our life I have never misrepresented. I know. My voice breaks on the second word. Evelyn leaves. I remain in the empty classroom until afternoon fades into evening. Volunteers arrive downstairs, learn from the news that my wife is Evelyn Cross, and pretend not to stare when they pass the office. Reporters gather beneath the awning. My phone fills with messages from clients, friends, former students, and numbers I do not recognize. At 6, Cross Meridian's general counsel emails a formal instruction prohibiting direct contact between Evelyn and me until the leadership vote is complete. At 6:15, Victor appears on financial television and calls the altered clause an unfortunate translation dispute. At 6:20, he says the CEO's undisclosed marriage has damaged the integrity of the acquisition. At 6:32, the City Records Office uploads a public filing I requested 2 months earlier and forgot about completely. The email subject says Bellwether Parcel Ownership History. I open it because I need something factual to hold. 3 holding companies purchased waterfront options before Cross Meridian announced the project. Their names are meaningless until I reach the beneficial ownership appendix. All 3 lead to the same private trust. The trustee is Victor Hale's brother. If the easement disappears, Victor's family does not simply help investors earn more. They make almost $90 million. The contract alteration was not designed only to remove Evelyn. It was designed to make Victor rich. By 7 the next morning, I am standing inside First Harbor Bank with Evelyn's brass key in one hand and our marriage certificate in the other. The deposit box contains exactly what she promised: drafts, meeting notes, printed emails, and a disclosure memorandum dated 18 months before our wedding. Evelyn had informed Victor that she volunteered and studied at Bellwether, that she intended to make anonymous donations to the center, and that any future transaction involving the district should be reviewed by an independent committee. Victor signed the memorandum himself. He had known about Evelyn's connection from the beginning. He had approved the firewall, then dismantled it when the connection became useful against her. Beneath the memorandum is a handwritten page from the first development meeting. Victor's proposal places the 3 family-controlled parcels outside the community easement. Evelyn's notes beside it contain 2 words underlined twice. Self-dealing risk. She saw him 18 months ago. She simply could not prove what he was building. I photograph nothing. I remove nothing except certified copies prepared by the bank officer. Then I call my agency director and ask her to meet me at Cross Meridian with the assignment selection log. She is silent for a moment before agreeing. At 8:30, I return to the building where my ordinary wife became Madam CEO. This time, reporters cover the pavement. Questions follow me through the revolving doors. Did Evelyn arrange your assignment? Did you alter the translation to save your mother's property? Is your marriage real? That last question makes me stop. I turn toward the cameras. My marriage is not evidence for or against a contract. The documents will speak for themselves. Then I walk inside. Cross Meridian's general counsel meets me in the lobby. Mara Chen is small, direct, and visibly exhausted. You are under no obligation to participate, she says. Victor will argue anything you provide is coordinated with Evelyn. Then separate us. Ask me questions she cannot hear. Verify every document without either of us present. Mara looks at the bank envelope. What did you find? A reason to stop discussing my wedding and start discussing Victor's money. The emergency meeting begins at 9. When I enter the boardroom again, no one stands. Evelyn is already seated at the head of the table. Her wedding ring is visible. Victor sits beside the windows with the confidence of a man who believes uncertainty belongs to everyone else. Mara swears me in as an independent witness. My agency director confirms the assignment software selected me based on language pair, availability, and merger experience. Evelyn's office never saw my name before the automated notice went out. Amélie joins by video and authenticates the archived French agreement. A forensic analyst confirms the altered English file entered through Victor's terminal, then borrowed the CEO office authorization from an earlier approved draft. Victor listens without interruption. Then he smiles. A terminal record is not a person, he says. My office is accessible to staff, and Mrs. Cross has had an entire night to construct a convenient story with her wife. I have had no contact with the CEO since 6 last evening, I say. You share a home. I slept at Bellwether. His smile thins. How moving. I place the city ownership record on the table. These 3 parcels belong to a trust managed by your brother. Removing the easement increases their projected value by almost $90 million. Victor finally stops smiling. Public records prove nothing improper. No, I say, your signature does. I place Evelyn's disclosure memorandum beside it. You acknowledged her connection to Bellwether and accepted responsibility for the independent review. Yesterday, you claimed that connection had been hidden from you. Board members begin reading. Evelyn remains completely still. She does not rescue me when Victor challenges the date. She does not answer when he calls my evidence selective. She gives me the dignity of standing on my own work. That matters. Victor turns to her. Even if every page is authentic, you concealed a spouse whose financial and emotional interests are tied to this acquisition. That alone makes your leadership untenable. Evelyn rises. The room quiets. Her name is Nora Bennett Cross, she says. She is an accredited interpreter, the director of Bellwether Language House, and my wife. She looks at me rather than the board. I kept our marriage private because I confused secrecy with safety. Nora did not ask for that secrecy, and she did not benefit from it. It harmed her personally and professionally. The responsibility is mine. Victor leans back, believing she has surrendered. Evelyn removes a document from her folder. Effective immediately, I am transferring my voting authority on this acquisition to the Independent Ethics Committee. I am also placing my CEO authority on voluntary 30-day leave while the board reviews my non-disclosure. I will not use my title to decide whether I deserve to keep it. She places the document on the table. But my recusal does not erase Mr. Hale's financial conflict, his false statement to this board, or the alteration made through his terminal. Those matters now belong to directors he does not chair. For the first time, Victor looks afraid. If you have ever waited for a powerful person to choose truth when a lie would have been easier, this is the moment I understood what courage actually costs. Evelyn did not choose me instead of her company. She chose accountability, knowing she could lose both. The independent directors ask Victor to leave while they deliberate. He refuses. Mara places one final record on the screen: security footage showing Victor entering his board office at 2:07 that morning and leaving at 2:19. No staff entered during the interval. The altered file was uploaded at 2:14. Victor looks around the table for an ally and discovers that power disappears quickly when everyone can finally see its source. Security escorts him out. The board does not deliver a cinematic verdict. Real institutions move through motions, votes, and careful language. Victor is suspended pending referral to financial regulators. The acquisition is frozen, the easement is restored in both languages, and placed beyond unilateral amendment. Evelyn's leave remains in effect, while an outside firm reviews her disclosures. She accepts every condition. Only after the room empties do we stand alone beside the table. Yesterday, she called me Ms. Bennett from the head of it. Today, her title is temporarily gone, and she looks more like my wife than she has at any moment since I entered the building. You told them, I say. Too late. Yes. She absorbs the word without asking me to soften it. Did you say it because Victor exposed us? No. He exposed a fact. I said it because treating you like a fact I had to hide was a kind of betrayal I will never repeat. I look at the chair marked CEO. Do you think they will give it back? I do not know. And if they do not? Her eyes stay on mine. Then I will still know who I am when I go home. Home. The word hurts, but it no longer sounds impossible. I do not forgive her in the boardroom. I do not cross the space between us and repair 3 years with one kiss. Love deserves a more honest ending than that. I need time, I say. Take all of it. And I need the whole truth, even when you think it will frighten me. Especially then. I leave first. This time, when the elevator doors close, she is not hiding her ring. 6 months later, the Bellwether Language House reopens after renovations. The easement is now held by an independent community trust. Cross Meridian funded the repairs, but owns no naming rights, no board seat, and no quiet mechanism for control. That was Evelyn's proposal, made after the outside review returned and the board restored her as CEO under new disclosure rules. My interpreting suspension lasted 3 weeks. The agency apologized publicly. I opened my own language consultancy 2 months later because surviving someone else's attempt to define your professional name makes you protective of it. Evelyn and I went to counseling. We argued carefully, and sometimes badly. She showed me security reports, board notices, family history, and the parts of her life she had once edited before bringing them home. I told her when information felt like intimacy and when it felt like another briefing. Trust did not return in one dramatic moment. It returned in ordinary ones, one complete answer at a time. At the reopening, I stand in my mother's classroom beneath the sign that says every voice belongs here. Students, volunteers, reporters, and neighbors fill every chair. Evelyn waits in the back row, wearing the same gray coat she wore to her first French lesson. When I finish speaking, everyone stands. This time, they are not standing for Madam CEO. They are standing for the center my mother built, for the people who protected it, and for every voice Victor expected paperwork to silence. Evelyn stands with them. After the room empties, she approaches the whiteboard and writes a sentence in French. No secrets between us. Her grammar is finally perfect. Show off, I say. She laughs. the warm, surprised laugh I fell in love with before I knew her title. Then she takes a ring from her pocket. Not a new one. Mine. I had left it on our kitchen counter the night after the board vote and told her I would wear it again when the marriage felt like a place where both of us could be fully seen. She holds it out without reaching for my hand. The choice remains mine. I take the ring. I slide it onto my finger myself. "Does this mean you forgive me?" she asks. "It means I believe what we are building now." Her eyes fill, but she smiles. Outside, rain begins tapping against the classroom windows. Somewhere downstairs, fresh bread cools in the bakery that has finally reopened. Evelyn helps me stack the chairs, still placing them in crooked rows because after 3 years of marriage and 6 months of French lessons, the CEO of Cross Meridian remains strangely incapable of judging a straight line. I watch her move through the room where we met and think about the morning 12 executives stood for her. They stood because of her title. I stayed because, once the title was no longer enough to protect her, she finally chose the truth. If this story moved you, share it with someone who has learned that love cannot survive on protection without honesty. And tell me in the comments, could you forgive a secret this large if every ordinary moment of love had still been real? Subscribe for more stories about powerful women, hidden lives, and the people brave enough to love them beyond every title.